thrilled this week to have another interview session for us. So this week we're going to be talking with Tara Ballantyne of Bright Littles and learning about the importance of critical conversations at home.
Thank you for having me today.
Yes, I am so excited to have this conversation. I actually, Tara, I heard about Tara from an email reaching out. And as I started looking into the stuff that Tara was doing, I knew immediately that I wanted to have her on the podcast and to do a video interview to share about something I'm so passionate about. And she has taken what I'm passionate about a step further into a great applicable thing that you can bring into your home. So without further ado, let's just dive straight in. We've already recognized that we can have this conversation and we can keep talking for hours about it. So we wanted to go ahead and hit record and include all of you listeners in on our conversation. So Tara, I would love for you to start before I introduce what Bright Littles is or anything. I'd love for you to just share a little of your story. I had the pleasure of reading that story that kind of showed how you even introduced this concept and how you started it. So share a little bit about what Bright Littles is and why you chose to create this business.
Yes, great question. We love questions around here.
Yes.
So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and the pandemic basically shut my business down. So I had a marketing company. I have a marketing company. It's starting to come back, but we were very hospitality based. And so overnight, the company basically shut down. And overnight, my child is now living, breathing, schooling, everything at home. And, you know, as many and all of us experience, like just our whole entire world changed. So I really was faced with where my child was and the questions that she had. She was experiencing tremendous amount of loss of friends, loss of playmates. And so honestly, this product was made out of me solving my own problem. So it started out me looking for resources to have a conversation with her about all the stuff she's seeing. There's a lot of homelessness going on in Austin. There's the marches. She can't go to the grocery store. And I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the tools, and I could not find them. So literally it started out of just trying to meet my daughter where she needed me to be. And that's how it started. I started educating myself. I started like putting thoughts and questions on Post-its that we could pull from like a bowl and talk about it. And so it started very organically and just with a piece of paper and a pen. And I kind of started to realize over time that I thought I was onto something. And the answers and the conversations that my daughter and I were having just blew me away. And she was 4 at the time when the pandemic started. She's now 6, and we continue to do the cards and we continue to elevate. And as I mentioned, I'm a serial entrepreneur and my world's been very separated from her. Like, she's my inspiration for this, and we do this together. So the new products that I'm creating, she's so much a part of it, and it has been the silver lining for our family and for my relationship with my daughter.
Okay, and just explain a little bit with what these questions are before we go into the next step. Yeah, what questions do you cover? So you created these questions, and it's these little conversation starters. So those of you on podcast are not seeing the video, but she is displaying them beautifully there. And we do have YouTube channels, so they will see it on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
So yes, so these fun little colorful conversation cards that, yes, they are fun. And also I have to also stress that they are also the kind that if they get messy and dirty, you can wipe them clean, which is very nice for small kids.
Very important. They're water resistant and dirty finger can be cleaned. The cards it's basically 100 questions supported by 25 different activities, and we cover 5 topics. And those topics are health, self, nature, diversity, and safety. And so the questions and the activities are supporting conversations in those areas.
And so with that, I mean, thinking about that, I mean, just what you listed off there: health, safety, self, nature, diversity. I mean, you're talking to a 4-year-old. How much of a conversation can you really have? What questions do you have? I know as a mom who, of course, feels very strongly and passionately about what it is you're talking about, I could completely sit and empathize with you as the mom of a 4-year-old, and you're seeing the homeless man with the sign. And what do I say to my child? And how do I, like, there is that, okay, do I say something, or are we just shielding? Because these are 4-year-olds, these are 2-year-olds, these are 3-year-olds, these are 6-year-olds. They're too young to be able to grasp this, right? Or
Well,
not.
or are they?
Right.
So okay, and that actually hits home what you just said. So when my daughter was 4 years old, we were sitting at a stoplight on our way home, and there was a man holding a sign, and my daughter asked me what it said, and I said, "It says have a nice day." And she straight up called me out. She said, "Mommy, what does it really say?"
And first
And
and
I said,
foremost, props to the child to recognize the fact that we sometimes really greatly underestimate our children and their ability to be a little bit of a BS sniffer. They can sniff it out a lot better than we realize sometimes.
they're
Go ahead.
100%. And I my parenting changed at that moment. And I was raised, a lot of us were raised that our parents would protect us. So they would tell us a white lie, if you will, and then we would continue forward. So we can either protect our kids or we can prepare our kids. So I answered her truthfully. I said that the sign said that he's hungry. And she said, "Well, why don't we do something about it?" And I was like, you're totally right. We should. Let me think about this. I don't have the answer. Let me get back to you. Because I didn't know what to do. And when we came home, she groceries, whatever, there's space and some time. And I came back to her and I was like, okay, let's talk about this and let's find ways that we can help. So from that, I asked her, and she's like, we couldn't give some of my toys. And I'm like, that's a great idea. So, and that's something that she came up with. And so it was an opportunity that we picked some toys and we went on a trip to Goodwill and we dropped those off, and we talked about that, about, what those toys could be and do for somebody who's never had toys. Another thing that we talked about is in Austin, a lot of homeless people have animals. And so we talked about creating goodie bags for the animals. And so anyways, my point being is they're filling in the blanks whether we want them to or not. And our children are wonderful little creatures if we actually would just kind of ask them some questions instead of telling them what to do. And that's what the conversation cards, you figure out what they know and then you can build from there.
Oh, I love that. And I mean, what you talked about there, I mean, how your parenting changed. I mean, that your job is not to protect them, but prepare them. I mean, I just mentioned this again in my podcast episode as we're airing this, the podcast that goes out this week. I was talking again about an episode that we have where we actually had talked with our friends that were former CIA spies, and they both were in the CIA. They had children, and we had them talk at an event that we hosted about safety. And what they talked about there is that instead of protecting our children and trying to watch out to make sure that they are always safe, we want to equip our children with the eyes to look for it. They have a whole different level of awareness, and even quite literally a different level. And my 9-year-old, what she sees at a 9-year-old level is going to be different than what I'm seeing at my height even. And so with that, and equipping our children, preparing our children for the future is so powerful. And I wanted to take another thing that you said there. I can just see the hesitation with somebody. Here you have a 4-year-old and they're asking about homelessness. Okay. And he or she, and even there, it's okay. Do I want to bring up the conversation again? Do I want to make an effort? Because if what if she wants to help? I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the time and energy to do anything for it. What can we do? And even with that, so you saw the homeless man, but you didn't go back to that one thing and do it. That conversation prompted a trip to Goodwill and a conversation about animals. I think that that really is an important aspect of it that that we kind of I want to talk about. You know, some of the fears that you have to overcome in opening up a conversation like this. I know that one fear is if there is a hard question, that we're going to have to dissect every element of this hard question, and we may not be ready to do that. What can you say to that? I know we've got some examples of even ways that this has happened, but you know, how did you prepare yourself for that first conversation when you were doing that? I mean, did you come prepared with, okay, I'm going to talk homelessness and I'm going to have these 3 solutions as things that my daughter can choose from that we're going to do? I mean, is that how you came prepared to that conversation, or did you come open? How did it go from there?
Well, first of all, I think it's okay to respond to your child and to say to them, like, let me get back to you. I don't have the answers. I think that one of the most powerful things that you can tell your child is, I don't have the answers. It shows them that they don't have to know everything. They don't have to be, you're not scared that you don't know something, and that so I think that is totally fine if you don't feel prepared and you want to take a beat. I think that the way that you're going to handle conversations, it really depends on your family, and what aligns and what's right for your family. But I think that my hope is that if we start this idea of having conversations when these questions come up, you're not as ill prepared. You have a foundation to be able to kind of resource, like, you're in practice of having conversations. And it's also important that you explore that a little bit. You can find out, well, that's a good question. I'm sorry, of course, everything's going to happen at once. Can you grab that? I think that you can say, that's a good question. Can you tell mommy why you're asking that question? Because maybe it's coming from a place, like, you've made an assumption and you've gone to a bad place, but perhaps the question is actually coming from a whole nother place. So what's the foundation? Ask them questions back to gather information so that you actually might be able to answer the question in that moment, and or you can answer what their question really is and where it's rooted from.
Oh, that's so true. You're right, because that is. It's like, where do babies come from? And we immediately start writing the whole birds and the bees talk and this long conversation. And what they really wanted to know is, something simple that had nothing to do with that. Where do babies come from? Meaning, where are babies born? And they just wanted to know if it was in a hospital or if it was at the grocery store. So yes, asking those questions and really getting to the root of it before you jump into your assumptions is so great. And then you kind of attested it to here. So it's not that you have these conversation cards with a question and an answer response. You don't have your easy answer for kids in this. This is not the goal of these conversations, to get a right answer.
No. First of all, there's no right answer because every family is completely different. These questions, though, they're age appropriate. There's no gotcha question. I'm not looking to create an uncomfortable situation. I'm not, I want these to be conversation starters that as a family, you can, and with a caregiver, you can explore these questions and you can learn together. And honestly, you're asking your child the question and letting them answer, because what this is doing is you're figuring out what they know. They're learning stuff without you all the time. And because little ears are everywhere, so they can overhear a conversation between parents and caregivers, whether it's radio, TV, Google, there's the news and the media that they can overhear. There's also conversations on the playground. Even though there's no divorce currently happening in my daughter's home, there's divorce happening in another child's home at school, and we talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, they're filling in the blanks whether we want them to or not, and I think it's so important to be an active role in having conversations and not waiting for them to come to you. But the Bright Little conversation starters help you figure out what your child knows. And I'll ask my daughter a question and we go off in a whole nother direction, but it opens up the dialogue for her to communicate with me about something that's going on in her world, something that she has a question about. And I spend a lot of my day telling her, put your shoes on, get in the car. Like, it's one way. And the cards actually put you in a mindset where you're talking and you're asking them what they think.
Yeah, that's so true. And to the point of the fact that, yeah, it doesn't matter necessarily that it's just the conversations that are in your house. They're impacted beyond that as well. My husband and I both were preschool teachers before we had our own children. And I remember there was a year where there was a tragic death, and a child and father were killed in a horrific accident where, I mean, it was a car accident and electrocuted half the car, and the other half survived. And it was a horrible scenario, and it was so traumatic. And we had some parents who told every detail to their kids, and we had some parents who didn't say a word about it and didn't even say that the boy had passed away. And so we had all these kids showing up in preschool. This is before elementary school, but we had these young kids all having different stories and very confused as to where this boy was living and what this imaginary place was, or if he was alive or if he was dead. And so, yes, those conversations happen no matter where you're at. And I love what you do have in these, that it's not a right or wrong. It's not even about necessarily hitting the exact question that you have.
Yeah.
Simply, these are a prompt to open that door.
There's some big stuff, and I don't recommend that you prompt your kid and start talking about it. I don't think unless your child is asking about school shootings. My daughter's 6. It's not appropriate.
Yes.
It's not an age appropriate conversation. But what if she does? And one of the things that we have available on our Instagram through tips is what to do and what to say if your kids ask about school shooting, divorce, death, bullying, what to look for, what to say, what to do. And we provide resources. So there's some big topics that there's no comfortable way to talk about those topics. They're horrible and they're awful, but it doesn't make them not happen. And we have to get comfortable talking about the uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we're leaving our kids out there to figure it out on their own. And that's when they can internalize, bottle it up, and it manifests in a lot of other ways. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to share emotion in front of the kids. If anything, it gives them permission to do it. And I just, like I said, my whole world has changed in the way that I grew up and the way that I think that I should be preparing and are preparing her versus protecting her. And it's having the uncomfortable conversations.
It's having a conversation, exactly like you said, not just put your shoes on and get in the car, but remembering these are tiny humans and we are humans as well. And we as humans don't have it all figured out. We have to have grace that we're still growing and learning in the process. And yeah, it's that constantly, having conversation, and that being the element of discovery versus, yes, being prepared with the right answers and the right actions all the time. So in this, we'll hit this because, yeah, that's the deal. So there's fear in this. There's fear in the taboo topics. I don't like talking about school shootings. I don't want to talk about that ever. It's not something that is a desirable conversation at the dinner table. I don't want to talk about suicide. That's a big one. That's a trigger for me. It's something that is a hard topic for me to talk about. So I don't want to, in one sense, and yet, oh my goodness, I am grateful for the support that I have found in my life to work through it. And my goodness, I so want that for my children.
So let's take those topics, because I think that's a really good point, that these cards are for 4 years old and up. We are not asking questions about suicide, but if you back that down to an age appropriate level, we are asking questions about how you feel. And we are giving children resources for a sad day and giving them the tools they need to express and feel. And so we're not talking to a 6-year-old about school shooting. However,
right. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same terminology of school shooting, but what prompted or gets you to that point? Yeah, the deeper.
Take it from a positive. Everything that we're talking about in the questions is positive. So, how do you feel? Like, let's give you, resources on how to breathe. We're talking about bullying from that, like, have you ever stood up for someone? Have you been a helper? Have you had someone help you? What's it feel like to be an ally? We don't talk about racism, but what we talk about is, do you have, we'll tackle immigration, for example, through like, do you know somebody who's from another country?
There we go. I read that one last night. Yes.
My mother's Japanese, my husband's from Australia. We have immigrants in our own, so it's learning from a positive way about immigration. With racism, we're talking about being an ally. We're talking about being a difference and using our voice, finding our voice, using our voice, expressing ourselves. So if you take these big topics, and it wasn't just me, like I worked with, people that know more than I do, and tested these, how do we start at a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old level having these conversations? What's the positive way to start introducing these topics? And it's through their experiences. Their experiences are going to be conflict, sharing, not wanting to share, fighting with siblings. Immigration can be about neighbors and communities that are from different cities, different states, different countries. You can learn about other countries through music, through food. There's so many positive, amazing ways to broach really big topics. And I truly believe, and I get emotional about this, we have the opportunity, we have the privilege to teach the most important generation that we've ever taught. They will, who knows what they're going to do, but like, the world is scary for parents, and we have to have these conversations, and we have to talk about this. Like, I tell people all the time, like, I had to do this. Like, if not me, then who? Like, we have to change the way that we're talking and communicating and caring and responding to people, not only in our home, not only in our neighbor and our community, but our world. Like, our world needs us. Our friends need us. Our neighbors need us. And it's my responsibility. I feel like it's my responsibility as a parent to start these conversations so that she can go out into the world and share these and have other conversations and learn. So, like, I literally had to do this.
Yeah. Well, and obviously that you are the person to do it. The passion that you have for this is the fuel that makes it so authentic, and I think brings it to life. And when I hear how you describe Bright Littles, I think of it kind of along the lines of functional medicine, where let's look at the whole being.
Absolutely.
And let's also look at what preventative measures. We're not going to talk about cancer. We're going to get through all of these things that you can do, and we're going to talk about and reinforce all the positive things that will keep you from having cancer. So you're not, I'm going to, well, even though you've gone the next step to provide those resources for if a school shooting happens and you have to have that conversation, you're really, yeah, you're talking to that child that never gets to that point of being that person that is going to be a participant in that or going to add to it. You're doing the preventative positive spin so that we don't have to go down these scary paths. And so I love, I mean, maybe that's, and like, as you're saying it, I'm getting ahas as to why I am so attracted to what it is you're doing. And that is another aspect of it, because you're bringing these hard topics. You're bringing some topics where the upper level, adult approach is that the scary trigger topics. It may be those things that we're uncomfortable with, but you are bringing it into a very positive, safe, very basic way to simply feel like really get to know where is my child at. One of the questions I asked our kids yesterday is, what does it mean to believe in something? This was diversity. And instantly my 9-year-old responds back, to believe in something is to have to feel, what did she say? A belief is a very strong opinion that you believe in and feel with your heart. And she went in to explain that a belief, what it means to believe in something, is a very strong feeling that can feel like a truth, but may or may not be. And I mean, her grasp at 9 years old, I was like, that's awesome. And wow, and what it did, to your point of having a conversation, it just made me impressed with my child of saying, oh, hey, that's really insightful. That was a great conversation we just had. That's a beautiful thing. I mean, just to spur conversation, to get to know our children as tiny little humans with those beautiful, intricate minds that one day are going to be leading and running our world. So
the way that they receive the world and the way that my daughter communicates the world and her friends when I'm around them, like, there really is a lot to learn from these little ones. And I feel like all the time I'm like, wow, my daughter, like, the world is so different, and she's the way she thinks and the way that she does stuff and the compassion and the empathy she has is quite something. We were walking the dog the other day, and we live in Austin, and we passed a house, and there was a gentleman watering the yard, and this dog was outside, and he looks like Willie Nelson. He's got long hair and he's got the bandana, and as we walked past, my daughter said, I wonder what he, she, they's dog's name is. Didn't skip a beat. And I was like, I don't know. We should go ask.
Huh. Wow. That's not a conversation we would have had in the 80s.
It was just so fluid and simple and easy for her. And I was like, wow, okay. It is that easy.
And that's an interesting one to bring up, because let's bring that one up, because this is such a hot topic. This is a generation that is experiencing a more of an openness of gender spectrum than what has ever been allowed for me growing up, for the previous generations. I mean, this generation has seen the legalization of homosexuality. I mean, this is a different generation that we have. And so one of the questions that you had in here is, some kids look like a boy or a girl on the outside, but feel differently on the inside. Do you feel like a boy or a girl or both on the inside?
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead. I know you have some examples on this too, and I could share one from mine as well. Go ahead.
So it's it's a question that we get feedback from, testimonials and emails. And I think sometimes your kids are going to ask, well, I know your kids are going to ask sometimes in ways that you just don't even think. One mom sent me a note saying that their daughter said that they felt like a unicorn on the inside.
I love that.
And like, that's absolutely awesome. However, as my daughter, so we FaceTimed my dad. My dad is in his late 60s, and he thinks very differently. And so we have used these cards through FaceTime over the pandemic because we don't have any family here. And that card was pulled, and my daughter's like, I feel like both. It depends on the day. And my dad was like, I could see. He was just kind of like, don't ask me. And I was like, Poppy, that's my daughter. Do you know the thing that Grandpa gave me that I love so much? The gift of nature. And do you know what's really cool about nature is there's amphibians and different animals that can be male or female in nature, depending on different circumstances. I was like, how cool is nature? And my dad called me later and he said, I never thought of it that way.
Huh.
And I think it's awesome that nature has the ability to do it, but I didn't feel like that towards like humans. And we had this really awesome conversation that changed the way he was thinking about it. And I just had to bring something into his world that he loves and respects and cares about, which he loves nature so much. So, you know, my daughter has a child that is transitioning in another first grade class, and my daughter has wanted to bring her a dress and wants to have play dates and loves her princess outfits. And I can't change the world, but I can prepare her to be an ally for that child and to have understanding. But I get it. It's hard, and not everybody's ready to have that conversation. And the other one we have is, do you know anyone who has two moms and two dads? My daughter answered that question by saying a family's name that I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, they're divorced. She has a dad and a stepdad. And I was like, oh, you're totally right.
Mm-hmm.
So look, I know some of these questions can make people feel uncomfortable, but our world is made up of many people in different shapes and sizes. And I believe if we can give grace and space and love, it's okay to be uncomfortable with it, but it's not going away.
Right. And it's okay to even say to your kids, I'm not really comfortable. I'm not really sure what I think about it, but I'm willing to learn and grow with you. And let's learn more, because we want to advocate before we place any judgments on anything. We have to seek to understand. I mean, I'm big on that, whether that's a no thank you bite and you don't tell me you don't like your food until you've tried it. You can't fight for or argue for something you have not educated yourself in. And that requires these conversations. When that question was asked of our daughters yesterday, we were talking about it. And again, us having friends where we've got some friends that are kind of questioning what their identity is and everything else. We kind of ended up going down a different rant with it where, my oldest was like, when I think, she says, I'm not in a point that I have any sexual interest in anybody, male, female, or anything. That's not on my radar. So what I'm looking at are activities. Well, I don't really put any gender on an activity. Whether I like to ride a bike doesn't matter if I'm a boy or if I'm a girl. Well, we had a great conversation about gender roles, or not gender specific roles or not, and talking about that. And and that's something that is an insight that in our family, with us having non-traditional roles, even with us as parents, with Nathan being the stay-at-home dad, she sees that and she's like, these are activities, these are ways that we do life that aren't gender specific. And so we had a whole other conversation outside of gender identity and identifying as one or the other or neither or both, and just about activities and trying to genderize something that isn't. So it prompts great conversation regardless. It doesn't mean we have to go and say this is our specific stance or this is a right or wrong or anything else. It just opens that door, and
Absolutely.
You give a lot of permission for us as parents to be able to share to our level of comfort, share in relation to what our belief system is, what our foundation is, or anything else. But it's that conversation that's so critical. I love that.
I do think I love Glennon Doyle, and I really enjoyed her book Untamed. And she talks about, you know, our kind of our need to keep labeling. Um, you know, I love in the Spanish language, you say, yo tengo, I have hunger, I have cold, and it's a
Mhm.
temporary thing. And back to the conversation about homelessness, you know, it was an opportunity for me to talk to my daughter about that is a circumstance that that person's going through, that they're a human.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, we're all humans. And, you know, I think that, you know, we want to be loved and we want to be understood and we want to be heard. And I use this over and all, but like, just to give people grace and space, you know, and to not, um, to hear people and to listen before we judge and make assumptions. And, you know, we have a lot to learn.
Mhm. And that's also a great thing to add for when it comes to um, when you talk about the grace in the space. I can kind of anticipate the answer to my next question, and that's, you know, how do you navigate discernment with your children on what they're sharing with others? I mean, you have a 4-year-old that's very comfortable saying she, they, he, you know, he, she, they, but how do you help her with navigating the kids around her that maybe are not comfortable with that or anything else? How do you help her to discern how to navigate her peers that may or may not know what's going on?
Um, well, that's a great question, and she's at an age where I don't feel like that's really been quite an issue. She's at an age where they're all kind of forming opinions and beliefs, and she's just coming into like being aware, like body image. She's just starting to be a little bit shy, and so the age that I'm at with her, like she's kind of coming into her own and kind of coming into her voice.
Mhm.
And but it's really hard to, I can't control what other kids are going to say on the playground. And honestly, I can't control her. Like she is her own little human being. What I try to give her and what I try to talk to her about and what we try to have conversations is letting other people feel heard, asking questions. Um, you know, there are the big ones that we have in here about who can touch your body or if you're feeling uncomfortable, that she has helpers around her that she can ask questions. She can talk to a teacher, she can talk to myself, you know, she's got the people in her life. But it kind of goes back to preparing her to receive the information and giving her a baseline of how to come to me and how for us to talk about it. I can't control what's happening. And so providing her the space at the dinner table or the space when we go on a walk to have those conversations. I firmly believe that by setting this foundation, that as she gets older, I hope that she comes with to me if something happens, whether it's a breakup, whether, you know, she has a friend that's doing drugs, if, you know, she's put in an uncomfortable position where peer pressure, that I'm setting that groundwork so that she can come to me and that we can have these conversations. And I might not have the answers, but we'll work through it together, and that I'm here for her.
Mhm. And that's such a key element. It's about creating the space of support, of them recognizing that they aren't alone in it, and that they have been able to come to you with conversations that are not taboo subjects, that you can actually have a safe space in order to do that. And I think so much your approach also, even like your approach with talking with the homeless man, you know, that we giving grace for others for where they are in their journey, where they are in their process and everything else. And that's a great way to navigate, um, you know, as our kids are growing in what they know, in the conversations and the openness that they have at home, recognizing the fact not everybody else is having that. Not every family has that openness. Not every kid is having those same conversations with their parents. And we have to that we can have some grace and understanding for not only the beauty of the sacredness of holding space for one another, but in the way that you're doing that by asking questions, because that's a really safe way to deal with it. Because if you're not just telling somebody and it's the questions, it's a little bit better to not, or a little bit easier to not have to be prepared with the perfect thing to say or the right way to do it.
I also think it's important to share your own experiences. And if you're feeling uncomfortable about something, you can talk about it. You can say, you know, I didn't grow up like that. And I grew up believing something different. And, you know, my grandparents are still alive. They came from the war, you know, they think and believe differently, and sharing pieces of information and sound bites like that. And you know, about when you were little, you know, things were different. You know, there was a time in my childhood that we were homeless and we lived in a car, and I shared that later with my daughter, and you know, said, you know, sometimes things happen, and you know, my mother didn't want that to happen, but you know, she worked really, really hard to work, provide for us. And you know, sometimes things are hard, and I have always been a little bit nervous. I had a hard childhood growing up, and I have started to find ways to that's Mr. Sparkles, he's a pandemic kitty cat.
We have two pandemic cats ourselves. So yes.
He rules the house.
Oh yeah.
He's going to participate.
There we go.
So, you know, again, I find age appropriate ways to talk to my child, but I share with her that I was a child that received used toys and used clothing, and how much of a difference that made in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And my child is an only child, and I don't want her to be homeless. I don't want her to be hungry, to have gratitude in her life. And so I find ways to share about my life and how it's a little bit different and how we can learn from that. Again, I'm a very open parent. I've it's taken me a while to get here. I feel comfortable. I don't have all the answers, but I'm every day I'm learning, I'm educating, I'm reading books, I'm having conversation with other parents, and I'm learning as I'm teaching.
Mm-hmm. And that is, quite honestly, in my opinion, one of the most effective ways of doing it is if you're putting it into practice. You're practicing what you're preaching and talking and walking the walk as you go. And I've said before and multiple times that, I mean, Mama Says Namaste was developed for that reason. It was me sharing my parenting musings, and in doing so, kind of keeping myself in check and accountable that I was doing what I wanted to do. And every time I create that content, it is that accountability check for me on, okay, am I actually reflecting that in my own life? And so, yeah, this is such a great way to do that. And I'm so grateful that we get to enjoy the journey that you're going on with you by you sharing this, because these questions, I think, are so powerful and insightful, and not as scary as you think, because you can ask that question that does look in your mind, your adult mind completely loads, for example, the boy girl one, you know, completely loads that into LGBTQAI plus. I need to know everything about all of it, and I don't want to go there, or my belief system is different, and I am trying to correct, you know, trying to go with where I was raised with this versus the reality of what is now. And there's a lot there, but this is simply a door opener, just like I'm talking about with the profiles. When I talk about personality profiles, you know, it's not an end all be all label. It's just opening the door to self-awareness. This is opening the door to beautiful conversation, and that's getting to know these tiny humans in your home.
Absolutely. I'm excited that in January we are launching a conversation journals, and our first 3 books are Safety, Activism, and Feelings. And again, they're It's a journal with prompts so that you can put your family safety plan into action. We've got prompts where you can cut it out and hang it on the wall. But again, you're preparing yourself. We did a market research survey that said that most parents they're not prepared for safety. And I know you mentioned that that's your podcast that's airing this week. So, some of this so that's one of the journals that we're doing. Another one is about feelings. I think, no matter what happens, giving the kids the foundation for feelings,
Mm-hmm.
Because safety, and if something scary happens, that's fear. You're scared, you're frozen, so talking about those feelings and getting into a very comfortable dialogue about mental health. When I say we don't have all the answers, I don't have all the answers. My child is suffering from having a lot of separation anxiety right now because of the pandemic. We're seeing a family therapist, and we talked to my daughter about how important it is that when you don't have the answers, you can there's tools, there's other people. Like daddy, when he changes, when we change something, we have a toolbox, and sometimes it's a toolbox of hammers and screwdrivers to hang something on the wall, but you got to have a toolbox for mental health as well. Yes. And it's a big conversation that we have. And so we've got a whole series of conversation journals coming out that are going to help families create what's that journal for their family.
That's so beautiful. And so such a great testament of your willingness to grow and that growth mindset that you're destigmatizing this. You're saying you're seeing a family therapist, not because everything is awful and you don't see the end. It's because you do care so much about this family that you're being proactive to do whatever, to use whatever resources and tools to support that family you thrive in. And yeah, the more we can destigmatize it and make that not a bad thing. Seeking help is not a bad thing. It used to be, we'd say, it takes a village, and we talk about a village and a community and everything. Well, let's bring community, and who is your support, and what resources do you have to support you all as you grow in your journey?
Absolutely. I absolutely agreed.
So with this, I wanted to just, and I know you've got, here's my list here. Just engaging kids. Let's just talk about for you. I see you've got them just the tips on the side. If I'm a brand new parent, don't even know how to start this conversation. How do I start this conversation? And
yeah. Well, so obviously we're talking about the cards which we have for sale, but not everybody is ready to make the purchase or has the financial means to make the purchase. And I believe that this conversation needs to be in all homes. And so we have a free SMS text platform that every week we give questions and tips about a specific topic. This week, we are talking about gratitude. And so Monday, we gave conversation starters to talk at the dinner table about gratitude. We finished the week with a challenge and about making thank you cards, and it's an activity. We have nature as one of them. So we talk about using nature to make your thank you cards and then to write them and send them, and for the parent to send one actually to the child. Other topics we've talked about is bullying, and we through, again, positive and proactive ways of having that conversation about being a helper, being an ally, how they can feel out, someone feels when they feel uncomfortable and they feel on the outside, well, how can you help a new kid at school feel comfortable? We've also tackled death. That's a big one. So how do you introduce the concept of death? There's dead plants, there's dead insects, there's lots of ways. And so one day we talked about all the questions around exploring nature. There's lots of opportunities. And then a family tree and creating a family tree with loved ones that have passed on, and to talk about that. And so not only are they learning who they are, but you're also learning about past through a proactive way that they've passed away. Mm-hmm. And so again, every week we put up, and that's free. And then in a couple weeks, we launch our mission to have these conversations in schools. And teachers and educators will be able to come to our website and to fill out a form, and we will send them a PDF version of the questions, that there's an activity for the kids for motor skills to be able to cut the questions, and those will be available in not only English but also Spanish. So it's really important to me that these conversations are at home, and I also think it's really important for these conversations to be held in the classroom. What an amazing opportunity to get so many different answers and to learn about different culture and different backgrounds, and to celebrate it and not be afraid of it. So it's been, I believe that real change starts with real conversation. And so, putting my money where my mouth is and making sure that we provide these to, schools usually don't have the resources for this stuff. So it's something that we're going to provide complimentary.
And I absolutely love the text. I have to say that, especially right now, where maybe people might be a little oversaturated with social media, oversaturated with even emails and everything else. I like the text. I get your texts and I see that pop up, and I say, okay, here's an opportunity to go through and read it through. We did it the other day, and on the death topic, you actually shared one about Dia de los Muertos. And we knew a little bit about it, and we'd seen the movie Coco, and we'd seen all of the different, we'd seen some of the movies about it. The Book of Life and Coco, I guess, are both books, both of them on there. And but we read that, and we read about what an ofrenda was, and I learned some new things about it. And then exactly what you want, we took that conversation and we went from there, and we ended up pulling up about Dia de los Muertos, talking a lot about that, talking about celebration, and then going back into people that have passed on in our life and celebrating them. And so, yeah, they're such great prompts, and they're great little activities. And I will say that the texts are the conversation cards I love having at the table. And I actually, in our high energy family, we were playing it the other day, not while we were eating, but we were playing a card game. And every time we'd shuffle, this was our conversation while we're shuffling and prepping for the next round. So we would have these conversations, and the game took a long time. We stopped and talked a lot instead.
What's nice about the cards is that, my daughter can't quite read yet. And so, it allows her to be interactive, that she feels like she's a part of it, and she pulls the card, and it's more of a game, and she likes the being in control of picking the card. And then, even though she can't quite read yet, we're getting there. I really wanted the cards to be bright and colorful and have icons that she could recognize. And so, one of my issues is I love books, but bedtime is hard time in my household. She doesn't want to go to bed, and she's a doer. She wants to be engaged, and so creating this resource allows her to participate in it. We use it on road trips. It's I try to give mindful gifts. So if you know me, you know what you're getting for Christmas. But it engages them, and it brings them into the conversation, even though they can't read.
Yes,
or helps them, be able to read some of the topics. So she gets really into it because she feels like she's a part of it.
You're going to have a 4-year-old that knows how to spell the word diversity before house, probably, but she'll know those words very well, for sure. And I love that. I love the cards as those door openers for conversations, and I love the text. Oftentimes is my easy button. It's my easy button for a curriculum idea. I mean, it's our theme for the week. It's a theme for education that we can take and go from there and build on. And as an unschooling parent, that one text may be our unschooling fodder for the week of resources. So there is a lot there. And, we tend to always look for the easy buttons in life. And, some of these conversations may not be an easy conversation. However, your easy button is your door opener in a card, your door opener in text with some prompts that you can do. I mean, these are some ways to help, and these are support for you to be able to have those conversations with your kids. So I really want to encourage people to do that as well. So if you listen to this and you sign up for these texts, and I will have a link for how to sign up with the texts in this along with us, or along with the interview here. I'll have a link for how you can go sign up. If you go and you do any of these exercises in the text, share on social media, share a picture of your kids doing it. You can share it in the Unschooling Families group. You can share it on Instagram. Tag Bright Littles and Mama Says Namaste. I'm going to be looking over those, and in the next week, we will randomly select one winner, and I want to send them a package of the conversation cards, because I do love these conversation starters. And as much as the text is my quick cheat sheet, I think this is that perfect Christmas gift and is a great thing to have front and center in your home as a reminder that these conversations need to happen.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm excited, and I don't know. I just think that they spark such amazing thoughts and ideas, and it really is a fun, amazing activity to do with your kids, but also as a family. I've learned a lot about my husband because we have these. They are relationship builders.
They are. Yes. Don't just use them with your kids. Go beyond that. I do. I agree. And that's such a great point. This is a 4-year-old focus, but this is a 40-year-old insight. Like you can get a lot out of it, even if you're having conversations with a bunch of 40-year-olds. So yes, thank you so much for being on. If you want to find more about Tara, go to brightlittles.com and you can get the conversations card there. You can find them on Instagram, and I'll have a link to go through, but it's bright_littles. And I will have that link to go straight to that text messaging app in our podcast notes this week. I want to see who all is taking advantage of these texts, just like I am. And I want to see some of the activities and insights that you shared. So post a picture of you doing the activities. Share an insight that you got from it. Whatever there is that shows us that you are having these powerful conversations in your home. And be sure to tag Bright Littles and Mama Says Namaste for your chance to win some of these conversation cards as well.
Absolutely. So, and let us know if there's a topic. I mean, there's so many conversations to be had, and we're just getting started. So we'd love to hear, what you feel is difficult to tackle, and we can help you. So I want you to have it, not avoid it.
Yes, I am eager for those journals to come out. I know I will be grabbing all 3 of the journals you mentioned because they sound wonderful. And yes, we will continue these conversations. So thank you so much for being on. Everyone who is listening, get intentional with your family. Don't be reactive to what's being thrown at you, but start to create that family that you thrive in, where everyone feels that they have a voice and that they can be heard in that home. And this is a great way to do it and celebrate how the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us.
1, 2, 3.
Up with Thank you.
Rising sun, already on the run. Mama says namaste. Life is a tangled mess, and you don't have to stress. Mama says namaste. 'Cause today I will stand up and be all that change.